I think it's instructive to air CNN's power rankings. You know, because CNN, they're like, campaigns are like sports to CNN and others. You know, it's like who's up, who's down. So now they have a power rankings. And I tweeted about this earlier in the week because it was kind of absurd. I mean, they had Kamala Harris first. And when you watch the reasons they had Kamala Harris first, it's kind of laughable. So I'm going to play you that if you could stomach it. I hope, you know, it's afternoon Eastern time, so hopefully you've eaten something. So I'm going to play you this, and then we'll show the reality. Because, as I said when this came out, this is just propaganda. Here we go. CNN. Harry Enton, their wise guy, forecaster.
Looking half joins us now. Yeah, CNN senior politics writer and analyst Harry Flash Enton,
the unhinged half
with the power ranking.
You know, I was going to model for Calvin Klein, but I decided to be with you two instead. Isn't that nice?
Thank you. Wow.
Yes. So we'll start with 6 through 10. Joe Biden's not on that. I think the biggest movers here, and we'll get to Elizabeth Warren coming down 3 spots. She's one of the bigger movers. Sherrod Brown, also one of the bigger movers. I would really say that there's kind of like a line here whereby I would group 6 through 8 together, and then 9 through 10. I don't think that these two are really in the same class at this particular point or tier at this point as these 3 are.
And that's based on the polling that you've seen, based on the endorsements, based on the activist support.
Right, that's exactly right. We're looking at a slew of different factors, and while it's not necessarily a statistical model, all of these different factors are being taken into account in our rankings. I mean, like, Kirsten Gillibrand is really nowhere in the polls. Julian Castro is really nowhere in the polls. A lot of people aren't really searching their names on Google, and they haven't really pulled a lot of endorsements.
Okay, so show us the top 5.
So let's look at the top 5, 1 through 5, and this is where we see some big movement going on here. And this one in particular, which we'll be talking about. Bernie Sanders has seen a lot of movement going up. Amy Klobuchar is also a little bit up. We've seen her poll numbers actually rise a little bit despite some of those negative reports on how she treats her staff. But really the top 2 right here are pretty stable with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. If I were making groupings here, I would really probably group 1 through 4 together, and then probably 5 would be in a little bit lower down.
And of course, I imagine this would change substantially if Biden or Beto O'Rourke got in.
Correct. I mean, we would probably see Beto and or Biden go up. Of course, 95% things, while they tend to happen most frequently, I don't know what the margin of error is around that. Talking about statistical models, I don't really know if there's a statistical model that's Joe Biden specific. Joe Biden's his own man. We'll see what happens. But until he gets in, I'm not saying he's in.
And what is it about Kamala Harris? She gets a lot of attention. She gets a lot of buzz. And so why is she your number 1 in the power rankings?
She's moved up in the polls. She's had very good Google trends, which we'll see in a moment. Activist support. Seth Maskett, who's a political scientist, has asked people in the early states, these activists, who they might consider supporting. And she's very high up on those lists.
All right, funds. There's been some...
So let me get this straight. Let me get this straight for you. So, and again, I'm not even going to show the polls yet. Because Kamala Harris is high up there in Google Trends, she is your number 1 over Bernie Sanders, who's raised, at this point, I don't even know how much he's raised, but in the first week, $10 million. Has 1 million volunteers, leading in New Hampshire's polls, moving up in Iowa's polls, which I'm about to show you. So, because some activists on the ground, and when CNN says activists, I don't particularly know who they consider the activist, but because some activists say they like her, and because people are searching for her on Google, that makes Kamala Harris number 1 over, frankly, even Joe Biden, who is leading in the polls, in most polls, and Bernie Sanders, who's, I mean, by every objective measure, money, volunteers, social media interaction, it's not really close as far as Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders. So let's continue with this guy, who, by the way, like reminds me of somebody out of A Bronx Tale. You know, one of these like Goomba Johnnies. You know what I'm saying?
Impressive fundraising hauls for some of these candidates who jumped in.
Yeah, so let's look at the story of why is Bernie Sanders up and Elizabeth Warren down. And look, Bernie Sanders has just raised a ton of money. My goodness gracious, how much Popeyes could I eat if I was able to raise as much money as
Almost
he did?
as much as you do now.
Perhaps so. Maybe I can bring in a little Bojangles. He raised $5.9 million in his first 24 hours and $10 million in his first 6 days. He was the only candidate so far to report raising more than $1.5 million in his first 24. Now, these are self-reports. We'll see what the FEC actually reports when it happens. But look, money is certainly correlated with future success. You need money to run a successful campaign, especially in a field that is going to have more than a dozen people running in it, to be able to outlast those other candidates. Versus Elizabeth Warren, who wants to run sort of a people-powered campaign, a lot of small donations. She hasn't reported. And if you look at sort of the reports that are coming in, they say, you should really keep your expectations down. She might not raise a lot of money. And
when they start telling you to keep your expectations down, it's for a reason. Let me ask you about Google, because Google search trends actually has been really interesting this campaign.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. One of the first signs that Kamala Harris was going to go up in the polls was her Google search trends on the day that she announced, that day that she launched her campaign. And if you look at the different Google searches on the day that they announced their campaign and compared all of them, she is number one. Bernie Sanders, who has run before, so people aren't looking him up to learn more about him. They're just really interested in this campaign. He has been really high up at number two. Cory Booker, who, we have up in the rankings, although not number one, is also pretty popular. But Elizabeth Warren, all the way down at number 5. And again, if you're running a people-powered campaign, you want people searching your name so they can give you money. And she's right now in the middle of the pack with that.
All right, so tell us about New Hampshire.
Notice how he just totally skipped over Tulsi Gabbard. Number 4 just goes right to Elizabeth Warren. I mean, that's basically what CNN and all of them have been doing. And Tulsi Gabbard has a town hall tonight. I'm not going to cover it live because I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube again. That's how we got a ban in the first place, even though we didn't really violate their copyright. So I will have a reaction, a thorough reaction video on Monday about Tulsi Gabbard. To be clear, CNN and Harry Enton, Mr. I Love Popeyes, Harry Enton, and, goes like this at the beginning of his little analysis. Apparently, Kamala Harris is number 1 in the power rankings because more people are looking her up in Google search, which would make sense because she has known, really, most people don't know nationwide who Kamala Harris is. And what's funny about that is CNN obviously doesn't care about this because Google's not suppressing CNN, but Google search, I mean, it's been reported, and Status Quo has experienced it, other independent outlets have experienced, Lee Camp has experienced it. Google search, they are deliberately suppressing down independent alternative outlets. So is it so out of the realm of possibility that they might push down Bernie Sanders, if they wanted to, Tulsi Gabbard, if they wanted to, even Elizabeth Warren, if they wanted to? I mean, I could do a whole marathon, maybe of 10 hours, just on Google and the CIA's connection with Google and the deep state's connection with Google. No, this ain't conspiratorial. This is fact after fact after fact is out there about Google. So I'm not saying that Kamala Harris doesn't have more search in Google than Bernie Sanders. What I am saying is that's not the basis of ranking someone number 1 in the Democratic field. And what this is called, you know how CNN, MSNBC, all of these networks, New York Times, Washington Post, essentially gave Donald Trump estimates from $2 billion to $3 billion, some estimates as high as $5 billion worth of free advertising and promotion. Well, what do you call this? What CNN is doing with California Senator Kamala Harris? There is no objectionable political analysis, no objective political analyst would say Kamala Harris right now is leading the Democratic primary field. You throw out your ideology, you throw out your bias, you just look at the numbers. Honestly, I think it would be more fair, just by the polls, to say Joe Biden is leading. Whether I like Joe Biden or not, I keep it real. He is leading in a lot of the polls. Not by much, which I'm about to show you. But if they put Joe Biden number 1, okay, it's debatable, but it's at least in the realm of fair. Kamala Harris, this is what Noam Chomsky, still going, 90 years strong. Would love to interview him. Calls manufacturing consent. They're trying to manufacture both awareness, brand ID, name recognition, and consent for Kamala Harris. Why is that? Well, is it Hillary Clinton? People don't like it, but should we not remind you that Kamala Harris's top donor in her Senate campaign and her entire career in the Senate, not a long career, 2.5 years. Time Warner, or now Warner Media, CNN's parent company, which was bought by AT&T, bought Warner Media last year. She had 100, the numbers are correct, what did she have? 128,000 from Warner Media. And, Hillbutts are very fast to say, well, Jordan, you're being dishonest. Those were individuals in the companies. Yeah, do you think it was the secretaries donating to Kamala Harris from Warner Media? You think it was like the coffee runners for executives? You think it was the interns? No. Individuals, donations, when you get to that high amount, if you look through FEC filings, it's usually maxed out donations from executives and other senior leadership. It's not to say there weren't some donations from rank and file workers, but by and large, and all that money, by the way, from Warner Media, formerly Time Warner, came during her Senate campaign. It didn't come while she was in the Senate. So Warner Media, CNN's parent company, which was just bought by AT&T last year, they were pulling for Kamala Harris. So there's no connection at all. None. To the adoring coverage CNN is giving Kamala Harris, which includes giving her a number 1 on the power ranking based on Google searches and activists on the ground. What activists are they talking about? The cashier at a diner? No offense to cashiers at a diner. Because you want to put Kamala Harris's activists and organizers up against Bernie Sanders' 1 million volunteers? Who do you think has more among the activist crowd right now? Please.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.